Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The wind howled around the spires of Hogwarts Castle like a restless spirit, sighing through windows and whispering across the lake. In the dungeons, where the air was cool and smelled faintly of damp stone and potion fumes, 3 students worked by wand light long after most others had gone to bed. Albus Potter's wand cast a steady glow over rows of dusty shelves, each lined with old jars labeled in fading ink. Inside, the murky liquids glimmered faintly, pickled newt eyes, bundles of dried herbs, something that might once have been a bat's wing. Merlin's beard, groaned Scorpius Malfoy, brushing cobwebs from his pale hair. You'd think after centuries of potions classes, someone might have thought to clean this place properly. Rose Granger Weasley snorted softly as she levitated a cracked cauldron into a bin. Some of these jars probably are centuries old. My mom says half of Hogwarts' supply cupboards haven't been cleared since the Founder's time. Albus smiled faintly. So we're doing the castle a favor then. Think of it. Historic cleanup crew of 2023. That'll look good on a resume. Rose shot him a look that said she wasn't fooled. They all knew why they were really here. Professor Ackerley, the new potions master, had given them detention for sneaking into the kitchens after hours. Cleaning out a dungeon storeroom was his idea of suitable punishment. Still, there was something about this room that drew them in. The shelves seemed endless, the air thick with history and the faint scent of potion smoke from lessons long past. Scorpius lifted a heavy crate, coughing as dust billowed out. Honestly, Al, your dad probably fought dragons and dark wizards, and were battling mildew. Rose chuckled. Well, every generation has its challenges. Then her wand light caught something glinting beneath a collapsed shelf. Wait, what's that? Albus knelt beside her, pushing aside splintered wood. There, half buried in dust, its edges were engraved with serpentine patterns, and the words, barely legible beneath the grime, read, "Beware the cauldron that dreams. It grants, but it takes." Creepy, Scorpius murmured. Sounds like something straight out of Slytherin's diary. Rose frowned thoughtfully. There's no record of any cauldron that dreams in our history of magic notes. Maybe it was one of the Founder's experiments? Albus traced the inscription with his finger. The metal felt cold, too cold. If it's connected to Slytherin, we should probably tell Professor Ackerley. But Rose hesitated. Or we could find out what it means first. There it was, the spark that had gotten the 3 of them into trouble more than once. Rose's curiosity, Scorpius's thirst for mystery, and Albus's quiet longing to prove himself worthy of the legacy that his name carried. Scorpius grinned. I vote we investigate. The worst that happens is we uncover a dusty old story. The best that happens, well, imagine it's something real. Albus glanced toward the door. The castle was silent except for the occasional creak of pipes and distant hoot of an owl. The torches in the corridor had burned low, leaving the dungeon steeped in half-shadow. All right, he said at last. Let's see what the cauldron that dreams really is. They spent the next hour digging through the farthest shelves, moving boxes and jars, revealing carvings in the stone floor, runes so old even Rose couldn't identify them. In the center of the floor lay a circular marking, faint but distinct, shaped like an ancient cauldron with a serpent coiled around its rim. When Albus touched it, the runes shimmered faintly before fading again. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Rose nodded, eyes wide. "It reacted to your magic." Scorpius leaned closer. "Maybe it's warded, or maybe it's asleep." The word hung in the air. From somewhere deep in the castle, a place far below even the dungeons, it wasn't quite a rumble, not quite a whisper. It was as though the castle itself had sighed in its sleep. The three of them froze. "Probably just the pipes," Scorpius said, though his voice lacked conviction. They decided to leave the storeroom then, though none of them spoke much as they climbed the stairs. The corridors of Hogwarts were dark, lined with slumbering portraits. A few ghosts drifted lazily by, offering curious looks, but no questions. By the time they reached the common room, the castle's silence felt almost too deep, too deliberate. That night, Albus dreamt of a vast cauldron buried beneath the castle, its surface black as obsidian, its rim alive with whispering shadows. A serpent's voice coiled through his mind, cold and smooth. "Wish, and it shall be so. But remember, child of light, every wish is paid in truth." He woke before dawn, heart pounding, the dream fading like smoke. But the words lingered. When he met Rose and Scorpius at breakfast the next morning, he didn't mention it, but from the way Rose's eyes darted toward him and Scorpius's uneasy silence, he suspected they had dreamed the same thing, and somewhere deep in the bones of Hogwarts the cauldron of wishes stirred. The next morning dawned pale and misty, the towers of Hogwarts Castle half hidden by fog that drifted in from the lake. Breakfast in the great hall was quieter than usual. Even the chatter of the enchanted ceiling, bright with restless clouds, seemed subdued. Albus Potter pushed scrambled eggs around his plate, his thoughts fixed on the dream that had haunted his sleep. The serpent's voice had sounded real, too real. Across from him, Scorpius Malfoy was pale but restless, fiddling with his spoon, while Rose Granger Weasley was scribbling notes onto a parchment, her quill darting furiously. Albus leaned forward. "You're thinking about it too, aren't you?" "There's no record of a cauldron of wishes anywhere in the Hogwarts archives, or at least not in anything public. I checked the library at dawn. Nothing in the Founders section, nothing in the Restricted section index." Scorpius glanced around before muttering, "Then that means it was hidden on purpose." Rose's quill froze. "Exactly." The clatter of plates filled the silence that followed. A flock of owls swooped through the high windows, scattering crumbs and letters. One landed before Albus, a small tawny owl with his father's handwriting on the envelope. He hesitated before opening it. "Go on," said Scorpius, eyes curious. Albus broke the seal and read quietly. "Albus, I heard you've been spending time with Professor Ackerley. He's a good man, but be cautious. Some of the old dungeons hold magic that even the staff don't fully understand. If you notice anything unusual, tell someone you trust. Don't try to handle it yourself. Love, Dad." Albus folded the letter slowly. His father had a habit of writing just when something mysterious began brewing at Hogwarts, as if he somehow knew. Scorpius raised an eyebrow. "So, are you going to tell him?" Albus shook his head. "Not yet. We don't even know what we found." Rose lowered her voice. "Then we should find out before anyone else does." That afternoon, between classes, the three of them slipped away to the dungeons again. The torches flickered with bluish light as if the air itself resisted their return. The door to the old storeroom creaked when Albus opened it, and a faint smell of metal and smoke drifted out. Nothing seemed different until Scorpius stepped closer to the rune circle on the floor. The markings were glowing faintly, pulsing like the heartbeat of something sleeping. "It's awake," whispered Rose. The moment she said it, a whisper filled the air, soft and silken. The voice wasn't human, it felt like a thought, pressing against their minds. "Wish, and I shall hear you." Albus's breath caught. "Did you—" "Yes," said Scorpius. His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. "I heard it too." Rose crouched down, wand trembling slightly, as she cast Revelio. The runes brightened, forming words that shimmered across the stone. "Here lies the cauldron of wishes, forged by the serpent's tongue. It grants the purest desire and demands the purest truth." Rose's eyes were wide. "This is old magic, possibly older than Hogwarts itself." Scorpius frowned. "You mean like the Chamber of Secrets?" "Worse," she said. "The chamber was a secret room. This is an enchantment woven into the castle's foundations." Before Albus could reply, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The three doused their wands and pressed against the shadows. The heavy door opened with a creak. Professor Ackerley entered, his long cloak sweeping the floor. He was younger than most professors, with keen eyes and dark hair streaked with silver. He looked around the storeroom, frowning slightly, before his gaze fell on the faint glow of the runes. "So it's true," he murmured to himself. "It still breathes." The trio exchanged quick glances. Albus whispered, "He knows about it." But before they could decide whether to reveal themselves, another figure appeared in the doorway, a tall seventh-year Slytherin student named Cassian Vale. His expression was cold, his green-trimmed robes immaculate. "Professor," Cassian said smoothly, "the others are waiting. We're ready for the next phase." Ackerley nodded once. "Good. We proceed tonight. The cauldron will open before the next full moon." And then they left, the door closing behind them. For a long moment, none of the hidden students spoke. Scorpius finally breathed. What did he mean? The others? Rose's expression had hardened. "I think we just found our first real clue." They returned to the common room that night with their minds racing. If Professor Ackerley and if Cassian and the others were part of something secret, it meant there was a group already trying to use the cauldron. Albus sat by the fire, watching the flames twist. "A wish that costs a truth," he murmured. "What kind of truth?" Rose closed her book softly. "Maybe the kind you can't take back." That night, none of them slept well. Albus dreamed again, this time of the dungeons crumbling away, revealing a black abyss. The cauldron floated above it, vast and gleaming, and from within rose shapes of light and shadow, memories, faces, whispers. And there, standing before it, was Cassian Vale. He looked older somehow, his eyes burning green, as he spoke to the void. "I wish for the wizarding world to be cleansed." A hand of shadow rose from the cauldron and touched his chest, and Cassian screamed as light poured from his heart into the darkness. Albus jolted awake, drenched in sweat. His dormitory was quiet, but for the faint hum that seemed to echo from the stone beneath his bed, like a heartbeat, slow and steady. The cauldron was not waiting to be found. It was already waking. The following day passed beneath a strange shadow. The sky over Hogwarts Castle had turned the color of pewter, heavy clouds hanging low enough to brush the tallest spires. Even the great hall, usually bright with chatter and floating candles, felt muted. Word had spread that Professor Ackerley was canceling his afternoon classes, an odd decision for a man known for his strict punctuality. Albus Potter felt the weight of that knowledge all through breakfast. Cassian Vale sat at the far end of the Slytherin table, his expression unreadable, though now and then Albus caught him glancing toward the dungeon doors. Scorpius Malfoy noticed it too. "He's planning something," Scorpius murmured. "You saw how he looked at Ackerley. They're working together. I bet it's about the Cauldron." Rose Granger Weasley lowered her copy of Moste Patente. "Then tonight we'll find out what? I'll handle the password to the Slytherin entrance. I know someone who owes me a favor." Albus arched a brow. "Do I want to know who?" She smirked faintly. "Probably not." That evening, the castle was alive with stormlight. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rolled across the forbidden forest. The corridors gleamed with dampness where the stones sweated from the humidity. After curfew, when the hourglass in the Gryffindor common room turned to midnight, the trio slipped out under the invisibility cloak, a relic Albus had inherited from his father. The cloak's silvery folds shimmered faintly as they crept through silent corridors. Suits of armor seemed to listen as they passed. The portraits whispered to one another in hushed tones. They reached the dungeon corridor where cold torches burned blue. Rose murmured a charm, and the stones at the far end shifted, revealing a hidden door, a side passage into the Slytherin common room. "Quickly," she whispered. Inside the room was deserted, lit only by the emerald glow from the lake beyond its windows. Green light rippled across the ceiling, giving everything a ghostly hue. From deeper within the dungeons came the sound of footsteps, several pairs, slow and deliberate. The trio followed at a distance until the passage widened into a long, vaulted chamber. There, gathered in a half-circle before the rune-engraved floor, stood Professor Ackerley and 6 students, Cassian among them. The professor's voice echoed softly. "Tonight, the heirs reclaim what was lost. The founders built Hogwarts to preserve knowledge, but one among them, Salazar Slytherin, forged something greater, the Cauldron of Wishes, born of his ambition and his gift for serpentine magic. Its power was buried, its name erased, but we, the new heirs, will awaken it." Rose's breath caught. "New heirs," she mouthed. Albus's eyes were fixed on the circle. The runes glowed brighter with every word. "What do we offer it, Professor?" Ackerley drew his wand. "Truth. Always truth." He touched the tip of his wand to his temple. A silver thread of memory drifted out, swirling like mist. "I give it my secret, my greatest shame." He lowered the memory into the circle, where it vanished in a flash of green light. The glow deepened to gold, and a pulse rippled through the air like a heartbeat. Cassian followed suit, placing his wand to his temple. "I give it my father's lie that our blood makes us better." His voice quivered. The thread vanished, and the cauldron's shape began to shimmer, faintly above the floor, half real, half reflection. Rose whispered, "They're feeding it memories. The cauldron's waking." The sound of their voices must have carried, for Cassian's head snapped up. His eyes swept the shadows, and for a moment Albus thought they were discovered. But Ackerley raised a hand. "Enough for tonight. It stirs, but it is not yet ready. When the full moon rises, the wish will be cast." The group dispersed. their footsteps echoing through the stone halls. Only when the last had gone did Albus pull off the invisibility cloak. Scorpius exhaled shakily. "We can't let them finish that ritual." Rose nodded. "The cauldron's power comes from balance. If they use it selfishly, it could destroy the castle, or worse." Albus felt the truth of it deep in his chest. The image of the dream of Cassian screaming as the cauldron claimed his light would not leave him. They returned to Gryffindor Tower as the storm broke fully over the castle. Lightning flashed across the windows, illuminating the portraits as they stirred restlessly. Albus couldn't sleep. He sat by the window watching rain sheet down the glass and thought of his father's warning. By dawn, a plan had formed in his mind. "We find the Chamber of Secrets," he said the next morning. "If Slytherin hid the cauldron, it'll be near there." Rose hesitated. "The chamber's been sealed for years. Then it's about time someone opened it again." After lessons, they made their way to the girls' bathroom on the second floor, the one haunted by moaning Myrtle. The ghost appeared immediately, floating above the sink, her voice high and mournful. "Oh, it's you again," she said, eyeing Albus with interest. "Another Potter come to disturb the plumbing?" Albus tried to smile. "We need to find the chamber, Myrtle. It's important." Her translucent eyes gleamed. "The chamber? Oh, I do love visitors. I'll show you, if you promise not to blow it up this time." With Myrtle's guidance, Rose traced the carved serpents on the sink and whispered, "Open." The porcelain shuddered, splitting apart, and the pipes below gaped wide. Cold air rushed up from the depths, smelling of old stone and something ancient. They slid down one after another, landing in the dark tunnel that wound beneath the school. The walls glittered with slime and faint traces of scales. At the tunnel's end, the familiar stone doors of the chamber loomed before them, engraved with entwined serpents and the Slytherin crest. Albus raised his wand. "Open." The serpents slithered apart, and the doors yawned open to reveal the Chamber of Secrets. It was exactly as his father had described. Immense pillars, a vast stone face at the far end, and the remains of the basilisk lying in ghostly silence. Yet there was something new. A tunnel behind the statue, sealed by runes that pulsed softly in the gloom. Rose's voice trembled. This must be it, the cauldron's resting place. As they stepped closer, the air grew colder. The runes whispered faintly, forming words that curled through their minds like smoke. Truth for wish, memory for power. Only the unbroken heart may command me. Then from behind them a voice said quietly, "Then it seems I've come just in time." They turned. Cassian Vale stood at the entrance, wand drawn, a strange calm in his eyes. "You didn't really think I wouldn't know? The cauldron doesn't want you, Potter. It wants me." And the doors behind him sealed shut with a hiss of stone. The sound of the stone doors sealing echoed through the chamber like a drumbeat of doom. Albus Potter's wand shot up instinctively, the tip flaring gold. Scorpius Malfoy moved beside him, wand raised, while Rose Granger Weasley's eyes darted to the tunnel behind the stone face of Salazar Slytherin. Every exit was blocked. Cassian Vale stepped forward, the green light of the chamber reflecting in his eyes. His expression was calm, almost too calm. "I warned Ackerley that you three would interfere," he said softly. "But he thinks you're children playing at bravery. I, however, know better. You've been poking around where you shouldn't." "We could say the same of you," Rose said, her voice steady despite the tension in her grip on her wand. You're trying to awaken something dangerous. You don't even understand it." Cassian's smile was cold. On the contrary, the cauldron was made by Slytherin himself, an artifact to purge weakness and restore purity. I am his heir, by blood and by will. I intend to finish what he began, Scorpius scoffed. "And how exactly does that work? You throw in a few memories, make a wish, and suddenly you're king of the world?" Cassian's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and venomous. "Not king, guardian. This world has forgotten its strength. The cauldron will remind it." Albus took a cautious step forward. "Cassian, you don't know what it'll take from you. You can't control magic that old." Cassian's expression didn't waver. "Control is an illusion. But destiny obeys the blood." With that, he turned his wand toward the tunnel sealed by runes and began to chant. The ancient words rolled through the air, sibilant and slow, and the temperature dropped until Albus could see his breath. The runes flared an eerie green. Rose whispered, "He's unlocking the seal." Albus's pulse. "Expelliarmus!" The spell shot across the chamber, but Cassian deflected it easily, the red beam ricocheting off a pillar. Stone cracked, and dust rained down from above. Cassian laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound. "You can't stop this, Potter. The cauldron has already chosen." The runes on the tunnel wall split apart with a sound like breaking glass. Beyond them, a faint golden light glimmered, illuminating the edge of what looked like a massive iron basin, the cauldron itself. It was enormous, carved with serpents and runes that seemed to move under the surface like living things. A voice, low and ancient, stirred the air. "Who wakes me?" Cassian lowered his wand, awe flickering in his expression. "I do. I am Cassian Vale, heir of Salazar Slytherin." The voice was neither male nor female. It was a whisper and a roar all at once, filling every corner of the chamber. Heir by claim or by heart? Cassian hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. "By blood." The cauldron's glow deepened. "Then show me your truth." A tendril of golden mist unfurled from the cauldron, coiling toward Cassian like smoke. It touched his chest and he gasped. Light spilled from him, memories flashing in the air, a crying child clutching a wand, a father shouting about disgrace, years of pressure and pain. Then the cauldron spoke again. "Your truth is pride. Pride cannot wish without ruin." Cassian's expression twisted. "No, I am worthy." He thrust both hands toward it, magic flaring from his wand in a wild arc. The light surged, but the cauldron drank it in, swallowing the spell whole. The chamber trembled. Scorpius shouted, "Albus, the runes, they're collapsing." Rose was already tracing patterns in the air, muttering counter charms. If the cauldron's rejecting him, the backlash could. She didn't finish. A blast of golden energy burst from the cauldron, flinging Cassian backward into one of the pillars. He hit the stone hard and slumped to the floor, motionless. Cracks split the floor. From within the cauldron, the golden light turned dark like molten shadow. "Wish," the voice thundered, "or be consumed." Albus didn't hesitate. He ran forward, his boots slipping on the wet stone. He reached the cauldron's edge and felt heat radiating from it like the breath of a dragon. "Albus, stop," Rose cried, but he couldn't. The voice in his mind grew clearer now, almost familiar. "You are of light and of burden. You have wished before. Wish again." He saw flashes in his mind, his father's face, the endless weight of the Potter name, the shadow of expectations he could never escape. He thought of Scorpius and Rose, of their courage and faith, and of Cassian's hollow eyes. He whispered, "I wish for the cauldron to sleep again." The air froze. The cauldron went still, as though considering. Then came the reply, soft but terrible. Every wish must pay its truth. A hand of molten light reached from the cauldron and touched his chest. Pain tore through him. Images burst before his eyes, his happiest moments, his mother's laughter, his friendship with Scorpius, all flickering like candle flames. He screamed as the cauldron began to draw something from him, something precious. Then Scorpius was beside him, gripping his arm. "No, Albus, don't let it take you," Rose shouted. "Break the link. Finite." A surge of blue light burst from her wand, striking the cauldron's rim. The link shattered with a sound like glass breaking under pressure. Albus fell backward, gasping, the world spinning. The glow inside the cauldron dimmed to embers. Silence fell. The tremors stopped. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Rose knelt beside Albus. "Are you all right?" He nodded weakly. "It tried to take something, but I think I stopped it." Scorpius glanced at Cassian, who was beginning to stir, dazed and pale. "What about him?" "He's lucky to be alive." But as they turned to leave, a faint whisper rose again from the cauldron, barely audible over the drip of water. One truth given, one wish sealed, the debt remains. The words followed them up through the tunnels, a chill threading through the air. Even after the chamber's doors closed behind them, Albus could still hear that voice echoing faintly in his mind. That night, as thunder rolled beyond the castle walls, he dreamt once more of the cauldron. Only this time the serpent's voice was quieter, almost tender. "You have wished for peace, child of light, but peace is never free." He woke before dawn, cold sweat on his skin, and realized that the memory of something vital had gone missing. He could no longer remember what it was he had wished against. When morning came, it arrived pale and brittle, as if the light itself were hesitant to touch the castle. Albus Potter woke late, his head heavy, and for a long moment he couldn't remember where he was. The dormitory was silent save for the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. The other boys were still asleep, but something in the air felt different, emptier somehow. He dressed slowly, his hands trembling as he laced his shoes. A fog lingered in his thoughts, like a dream half forgotten. When he tried to recall the night before, the chamber, the cauldron, the flash of gold, it slipped from his mind like water through his fingers. He remembered only fear and light and Scorpius's voice calling his name. By the time he reached the great hall, the storm had settled into a cold drizzle. The enchanted ceiling mirrored the gray sky above. Rose Granger Weasley was already seated, her books stacked neatly beside her plate, though her food remained untouched. She looked up when Albus sat down across from her. "You're pale," she said softly. "Did you sleep at all?" "Barely." He rubbed his temples. "I keep thinking I've forgotten something." "Then it wasn't just me." "What do you mean?" "I tried to write about what happened last night," Rose said, lowering her voice. "But when I got to the part about the cauldron, nothing. My quill just stopped. It's like my memory refuses to shape the words." Albus stared at her. "You think it took something from us?" Rose nodded grimly. "Maybe not memories exactly, but fragments, feelings, the kind that guide what you believe." Before Albus could reply, Scorpius Malfoy appeared, dripping from the rain. He dropped onto the bench beside them, shaking out his robes. "You both look awful," he said cheerfully, though his voice carried a brittle edge. "If anyone asks, we were studying all night for Ackerley's exam." Albus frowned. "Are you all right?" Scorpius hesitated. I think so. Just strange dreams. I can't quite remember them, but I keep hearing a voice saying, "The debt remains." Does that mean anything to you? Rose's fork clattered against her plate. Yes, she whispered. It's what the cauldron said before we left the chamber. For a moment, none of them spoke. The air between them seemed to hum faintly, as though the castle itself were listening. Then Professor Ackerley entered the hall, his robes immaculate despite the rain. His eyes flicked briefly toward their table, and a faint smile touched his lips, one that did not reach his eyes. Rose followed his gaze, unease clouding her features. He knows something happened. Scorpius leaned closer. Then we keep quiet. No one's going to believe us anyway. But Albus wasn't convinced. That night's events, fragmented though they were, pulsed in his veins like a half-remembered spell. He couldn't stop thinking about Cassian Vale lying unconscious in the chamber, nor the voice that had spoken to him. That afternoon, while Rose and Scorpius were in the library, Albus returned to the dungeons alone. The halls were... He stopped before the door to the old storeroom, the place where it had all begun. To his surprise, it was no longer sealed. Someone had been there. Inside, the shelves were bare. The rune-marked floor was scrubbed clean, as if the stones themselves had been replaced. But when he knelt and touched the center of the room, he felt a faint pulse beneath his fingertips, like the echo of a heartbeat. "The cauldron's still alive," he murmured. "You shouldn't be here, Potter." The voice came from behind him. He turned sharply, wand raised. Professor Ackerley stood in the doorway, his face calm, his eyes glinting like steel. "I was looking for you," Albus said, forcing his voice steady. "Cassian Vale? What happened to him?" Ackerley stepped inside, his boots silent on the stone. "Mr. Vale is recovering in the hospital wing. He'll be returning home tomorrow. His family has agreed to withdraw him from Hogwarts." "What did you do to him?" "I did nothing," Ackerley said quietly. "The castle did. Hogwarts protects its secrets, Mr. Potter. You'd do well to remember that." Albus's grip on his wand tightened. "You were part of it. The new heirs. You tried to wake the cauldron." The professor's expression didn't change. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing in a school built on ancient foundations. Tell me, did you get what you wished for?" The question sent a chill down Albus's spine. "I didn't make a wish." Ackerley's lips curved slightly. "No? Then perhaps it made one for you." He turned and walked toward the door. "Stay away from the dungeons, Potter. The cauldron sleeps now, but sleep is not the same as death." When he was gone, Albus sank onto the nearest crate, his heart hammering. He couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen still lingered in the air. A whisper at the edge of hearing. That night, the whisper returned in his dreams. He stood again before the cauldron. But this time the serpent's voice was gone. The basin was filled, not with light. When he looked into it, he saw himself older, harder, a stranger's reflection staring back. Then the reflection spoke. "You wished for peace, but you fear what you'll lose to keep it." Albus reached out to touch the water and felt something cold wrap around his wrist. He woke with a shout, sitting bolt upright in his bed. Scorpius stirred in the next bed. "What is it?" Albus swallowed hard. "It's not over." Over the next days, strange things began happening around the castle. Students whispered about lights flickering in the dungeons and faint voices heard in the pipes. A few swore they'd seen ripples move across the lake even when the wind was still. Rose found traces of new runes forming on the walls. patterns that hadn't been there before. "It's spreading," she said grimly one evening, showing Albus her parchment sketches. Whatever power the cauldron held, it's seeping into the castle. Scorpius frowned. Like a curse? More like a memory that refuses to fade. That night, as they walked back to the common room, they passed the grand staircase. The portraits lining the walls seemed to turn their heads as they passed. One, an old witch in green robes, called softly to Albus. "You've stirred old magic, boy," she said. "It remembers its master, and it always collects its debt." Albus froze. What debt? But the portrait only smiled, her painted eyes glittering. The kind that takes from the heart? By the time they reached the top of the stairs, Albus's pulse was hammering. He didn't know what debt she meant or what price he had already begun to pay, but in the deepest part of him, he could feel it stirring. Something beneath the castle was awake again, and this time it was waiting for him. The rain continued for days, a steady drumming upon the towers and courtyards of Hogwarts Castle. The lake swelled until the reeds at its edge vanished beneath gray water, and mist crept into the valleys. Inside the castle, candles burned longer than usual, and the students whispered of omens, of strange echoes in the halls, of mirrors misting over with shapes that should not be there. Albus Potter heard the whispers, though he said nothing. His dreams had grown darker. Each night the cauldron returned to him, and each morning he woke with a hollow ache, as if something inside him were being slowly carved away. On the fourth night after his encounter with Professor Ackerley, he woke to find a faint golden light seeping beneath the dormitory door. He rose quietly, drew his wand, and opened it. The light was coming from the corridor beyond, a shimmering trail leading down the staircase. Without waking Scorpius or the others, he followed it. The castle was utterly still. Portraits slumbered in their frames, and the ghosts were nowhere to be seen. The light led him downward, through the common room, along the darkened corridors, and into the lower halls that smelled of stone and damp. When he reached the entrance to the dungeons, the light vanished. He paused, heart pounding. Then a voice, faint as breath, whispered, "Albus Potter." He turned sharply. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor, cloaked and hooded. The torchlight flickered against the wet stone, and for a moment he thought it might be Ackerley. But the voice that followed was different, older, steadier. "You should not have wished." Albus raised his wand. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, revealing a weathered face framed by silver hair. Her eyes were sharp and knowing. "Professor Vector," he said in surprise. She inclined her head. "You've walked in places few dare, Mr. Potter. The castle is changing because of it. I don't understand." "The cauldron was never meant to grant mortal wishes," she said softly. "It is a mirror of truth, forged by Slytherin to test the hearts of men. What it grants, it also consumes. You have touched it, and now it knows you." "Knows me how?" "It sees your fear, your doubt, and it will draw on them until it is satisfied." "I tried to seal it," he said. "I wished for it to sleep again." Vector's eyes glimmered. "Then it sleeps within you. The wish and the wisher are bound. You are the vessel now." Her words struck him like a blow. "You mean it's inside me?" "In a manner of speaking. Its essence clings to you. That is why you cannot remember parts of what happened. The cauldron feeds on memory. It devours what defines you. If you let it grow stronger, it will take more." He felt the corridor spin slightly around him. "How do I stop it?" Vector's voice lowered. There is one way. You must find the echo of the founder, a piece of Slytherin's soul left behind to guard the Cauldron's purpose. It lies where ambition meets regret. Before he could ask more, she lifted her wand and the torches dimmed. Tell no one of this. The castle watches, even now. When the light returned, she was gone. Albus stood alone in another corridor, her words echoing in his mind. Ambition meets regret. Where could that be? The next morning, he told Rose and Scorpius only part of what had happened. Professor Vector warned me that the Cauldron isn't finished with us, he said. It's still connected. To me? Scorpius looked alarmed. That's why you've been waking up looking like a ghost. Rose frowned thoughtfully. An echo of the founder? If she's right, that means Slytherin left behind a memory of himself. Not a ghost exactly, more like a magical imprint. Where ambition meets regret, Albus murmured. Any ideas? Rose tapped her quill against her parchment. Ambition? That's clearly Slytherin's legacy. Regret might mean the place where his plans failed. Somewhere tied to the chamber, perhaps, but not within it. Scorpius leaned back. Or something tied to his students, the place where he realized he couldn't control what he'd created. Rose's eyes widened. It was built centuries later, but on the same foundation as one of Slytherin's old training rooms. Albus nodded slowly. Then we start there. That night, under cover of darkness, they slipped through the empty corridors. The dueling hall was vast and echoing, the air heavy with the scent of iron and old spells. Moonlight streamed through high windows, casting silver patterns on the floor. Rose drew her wand. Revelio. The floor rippled faintly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then runes began to appear, faint green lines etching themselves across the flagstones. Scorpius whistled softly. Looks like we found something. The air thickened, heavy with old magic. A voice spoke from the shadows, deep and resonant. Who seeks the founder's echo? The three froze. From the far end of the hall, a mist began to gather, swirling into the shape of a tall figure in ancient robes. His eyes gleamed like polished emeralds. Beneath his hood, Rose whispered, Salazar Slytherin. The shade inclined his head. Names fade, but echoes remain. Why disturb my rest? Albus stepped forward. Because your creation, the Cauldron, is awake again. It's hurting the castle. The specter's gaze sharpened. The Cauldron does as it was meant to do. Those who seek power invite their own undoing. I didn't seek power, Albus said. I tried to stop it. The echo tilted its head. Then why does it call your name in the dark? Albus hesitated. Because I made a wish. The chamber filled with a low hum like the murmuring of snakes. A wish is a truth unveiled. What truth did you give it, child of the chosen? Albus's throat tightened. I don't remember. Then you have already paid the price? Rose stepped forward. There must be a way to undo it. The specter regarded her silently for a moment. Then slowly it raised a hand and a green flame appeared above its palm. Within the flame swirled shapes. Images of the Cauldron, of light and shadow intertwined. But there is balance. The Cauldron cannot sleep unless the truth it took is freely returned. You must remember what you gave up and offer it willingly once more. Scorpius frowned. That sounds suspiciously like dying. Not death, said the echo. Exchange. The flame dimmed. Beware the man who seeks to claim your debt. He will come soon. When he does, choose carefully which truth you surrender. The mist dissolved, leaving only silence. Albus turned to his friends, heart pounding. A man who seeks my debt. Rose's eyes were troubled. Ackerley, Scorpius nodded grimly. Then the next move's his. As they left the dueling hall, the castle seemed to hold its breath. Thunder rolled once more over the lake, and a single torch flickered to life behind them, though none had touched it. High in his office, Professor Ackerley stood at the window, watching the storm. His reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, and when he smiled, a trace of gold light flickered in his eyes, like fire reflected in a cauldron's depths. "The debt remains," he whispered, "and soon it will be paid in full." The days that followed passed beneath a veil of tension so heavy that even the portraits whispered in quieter tones. Something unseen had begun to move through Hogwarts Castle, creeping between its stones like a breath of shadow. Books vanished from the library, candles flickered with green fire, and the air itself carried a faint hum, low, restless, and alive. Albus Potter could feel it, thrumming in his bones. The cauldron's presence was no longer bound to the dungeons. It drifted through the castle like a heartbeat pulsing just beneath the surface, and though he tried to ignore it, the whisper came to him at odd moments. When he crossed the great hall, when he climbed the stairs at night, when he closed his eyes to sleep. The debt remains. He hadn't told Rose or Scorpius that the voice had grown louder. It was not the serpent's voice now, but a man's. The kind of voice that made promises sound safe. On the fifth evening, the three of them met in the empty classroom near the astronomy tower. Rose had drawn the curtains and spread her notes across the desks. Maps of the castle, diagrams of the runes, and translations of ancient phrases written in Slytherin's hand. "We're missing something," she said, tapping her quill against a map. "The cauldron isn't just feeding off Albus, it's feeding through him. Every time he hears that voice, the magic spreads. The castle's reacting to him." Scorpius frowned. "So what, we just quarantine him? Keep him away from the walls?" Albus gave him a tired smile. "That might be difficult. The walls tend to follow me." Rose ignored the remark. "If Ackerley really plans to claim your debt, it means he's after control. He can't use the cauldron directly. It rejected him, just like it did Cassian. But if he channels it through you, he gets what he wants." Albus finished. Power without paying the price. Lightning flared outside the window, momentarily blinding them. When the light faded, a shape stood in the doorway. Professor Ackerley. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him with a soft click. "An admirable theory, Miss Granger Weasley," he said pleasantly, "and not far from the truth." Rose's wand was in her hand in an instant. "Stay where you are." He raised his hands, smiling faintly. "Violence is hardly necessary. I came to speak, not to fight." His eyes shifted to Albus. "You've felt it, haven't you? The pull, the power waiting beneath your skin." Albus said nothing. Ackerley's voice softened. "You think it's a curse? It isn't. It's a gift. Slytherin made the cauldron to test the worthy. You passed its trial. None of us did. You could make things right again, Albus. You could wish for peace, for balance. You could rebuild the world your father fought to save. You mean you could rebuild it with him as your weapon?" Ackerley's expression did not change, but his eyes darkened. "Weapons are tools of destruction. Albus would be a vessel of creation." "By losing himself," Rose demanded, "you'd drain him dry." He sighed, almost pityingly. "You children think in such simple terms. Light, dark, good, evil. The truth lies between them, and the cauldron knows that. It is not cruel. It merely reveals what already is." He took a step forward. "Let me help you control it, Albus, before it consumes you." But Albus could see something in his eyes, something flickering and wrong. The faint gleam of gold, the same hue as the cauldron's light. "You've already been touched by it," he said slowly. Ackerley smiled. "Long before you were born. The cauldron called to me when I was a student. I found it once, but I was too weak to awaken it. When I saw you touch those runes, I knew it had chosen another." The torches in the room flared green. Shadows thickened along the walls, rippling like water. Rose stepped back, her wand trembling. "He's channeling it now through the castle." "Stop!" Albus shouted. "You'll tear Hogwarts apart." Ackerley's voice rose above the roar of the wind that suddenly howled through the shutters. "Only if it resists. Give it what it seeks, Albus. One final truth." The air cracked like thunder. Desks flew aside. The runes on Rose's maps ignited, blazing across the floor in twisting patterns. In the heart of that light, the cauldron appeared, its shadowed form rising like a mirage, gold and black swirling together. Ackerley's expression was one of reverence. At last. The voice that came from the cauldron was deeper than before, colder. "The debt shall be claimed." A beam of golden fire burst from the cauldron, striking Albus in the chest. He staggered, gasping as the magic flooded him, hot, endless, unstoppable. He heard Scorpius shouting his name, felt Rose trying to drag him. He stood once more within the dream space, the void of gold and shadow where the cauldron floated above an abyss. A figure waited beside it now. Not the serpent, not the shade of Slytherin. A man in black robes, his face obscured by light, his voice unmistakable. "You owe me, Albus Potter." "Ackerley." The man stepped forward and the dream warped around him. "Give me your truth, and I will end this. Refuse, and the cauldron will devour you whole." Albus's heart hammered. "You can't control it." "I don't need to control it," Ackerley said. "I only need your consent." Behind him, faint echoes stirred, the faces of Rose and Scorpius, calling to him, blurred by light. Albus looked into the cauldron and saw himself again, the same reflection that haunted his dreams. Older, colder, eyes filled with fire. He understood then what the cauldron had taken from him, not a memory but his fear. It had devoured the part of him that hesitated. That was his truth, the part of him that doubted, and now without it he was not afraid. He straightened, and when he spoke, his voice rang with calm resolve. "You want my truth, Professor? Take it." He lifted his hand and pressed it against the cauldron's surface. Light surged upward, engulfing Ackerley in a blaze of gold. The man cried out, his voice breaking into 1,000 echoes. The dream shattered. When Albus opened his eyes, the classroom was in ruins. Smoke curled from the scorched floor, and Ackerley lay unconscious at the center of a blackened circle. Rose and Scorpius were beside him, coughing from the dust. Rose caught her breath first. "Albus, what did you do?" He looked down at his hands. Faint golden veins glimmered beneath his skin, fading slowly. "I gave it what it wanted, the truth of what I am." Scorpius eyed him warily. "And what's that?" Albus managed a small, weary smile. "Someone who won't run anymore." The cauldron's echo, yet as they helped Ackerley to his feet and carried him toward the infirmary, Albus felt something shift within him. A quiet hum, steady and deep. The cauldron was gone, sealed again, but its power lingered in his blood, patient and waiting, and though the castle seemed calm once more, Albus knew that some debts were not paid with truth alone. They waited until the next wish was whispered in the dark. The storm that had tormented Hogwarts Castle for a week finally broke at dawn. The sky was washed clean, streaked with pale light that glimmered upon the wet roofs and turrets. But inside the castle, the air felt heavy still, as though the stones themselves remembered what had transpired in the night. Professor Ackerley had been taken away before sunrise. The Ministry of Magic sent 2 Aurors, stern men in dark cloaks, who arrived without ceremony and left as quietly as they had come. Few students saw them, though word spread swiftly that something had gone terribly wrong in one of the upper classrooms. No one mentioned Albus Potter's name aloud, but glances followed him wherever he went. He bore the attention silently. There were faint gold lines along his palms still, hidden beneath his sleeves, and though they no longer glowed, they pulsed faintly when he stood too near the dungeon walls. Rose and Scorpius kept close to him in the days that followed. "They're saying Ackerley's lost his memory," Scorpius said one afternoon, lowering his voice as they crossed the courtyard. "Doesn't even remember teaching here. They think he had some kind of magical breakdown." Rose frowned. "No, not a breakdown. The Cauldron took what it was owed. It warned us it would." Albus said nothing. The truth weighed heavily on his chest. He had given up his fear, his hesitation to seal the Cauldron, but he could not decide whether that had freed him or changed him. The nights were quiet now, but in their silence lay an emptiness that as autumn deepened, the castle seemed to settle. Classes resumed, laughter returned to the great hall, and even the ghosts drifted about with a little more ease. But Albus noticed things others didn't. Torches flickering when he passed, pages turning of their own accord, reflections in the windows that didn't quite match his movements. One evening, as the first frost glazed the windows, he found himself drawn to the dungeons again. He told himself it was curiosity, but some deeper instinct guided him. The air grew colder the farther he descended until he reached the abandoned storeroom where it had all begun. The room looked ordinary now, dusty shelves, cracked cauldrons, a faint smell of damp stone. Yet as he stepped inside, a warmth spread through his chest and a voice, soft, almost kind, stirred in his mind. "The debt is paid, but debts birth legacies." He froze. "Who's there?" The air shimmered faintly, and for a heartbeat, he saw the outline of the great cauldron ghostly and golden. Within its depths flickered not fire, but images. His father's face, Rose and Scorpius laughing in the common room, and beneath them all a shadow, vast and waiting. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Every wish shapes the world, Albus Potter. You have silenced me, but my echo endures." He backed away slowly, but the vision did not fade. Instead, the shadow within the cauldron shifted, rising until it filled the air before him, and from that shadow stepped a figure, tall, robed in darkness, its features obscured, but unmistakably human. "Do you know who I am?" it asked. Albus swallowed hard. "You're the Cauldron." The figure inclined its head. "Not merely. I am the will of those who wished before you. Slytherin's dream, Ackerley's hunger, your father's hope, all flow through me." "What do you want?" "To endure," it said simply. "The world forgets, and yet every wish, whispered in fear or longing, feeds my flame. You have the next wish will awaken me anew." Albus raised his wand, though his hand trembled. "I won't let that happen." The shadow smiled, a curl of gold and darkness. "You misunderstand, child of light. You do not have to let it happen. It already has." and then the shadow was gone. He stood alone in the room, breath ragged, the air cold once more. But on the floor, where the runes had once been, a new marking shimmered faintly. A serpent curled around a cauldron, its eyes glinting like twin stars. When he returned to the Gryffindor common room, Rose and Scorpius were waiting. They saw the look on his face and rose immediately. "It's still there, isn't it?" Rose asked quietly. He nodded. "It spoke to me. Said the cauldron isn't just an artifact, it's an echo of every wish ever made." Scorpius frowned. "That sounds horribly poetic and horribly dangerous." Albus managed a faint smile. "Both, I think." Rose crossed her arms. "Then we destroy it properly this time." "How?" he asked. "It's tied to the castle itself. Maybe even to magic itself. Every spell, every potion, every hope. It all begins with a wish for change. How do you destroy that?" For once, Rose had no answer. The weeks that followed passed in uneasy peace. Winter arrived, and snow blanketed the grounds, muffling the world in silence. Lessons grew shorter as Yule approached and the castle prepared for the holidays. Yet even amid the laughter and bright decorations, Albus sensed a lingering tension, like the moment before a storm. On the last evening before the break, he climbed the astronomy tower alone. The air was sharp, the stars brilliant above. The lake gleamed silver in the moonlight, and the forbidden forest whispered softly in the wind. He leaned against the stone rail, his thoughts heavy. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to think not of the cauldron or Ackerley, but of his father, of the legacy he had inherited. "I don't know what I'm meant to do," he murmured to the night. "Every choice feels like another spell cast without knowing its cost." A soft sound behind him made him turn. Scorpius stood there, bundled in his cloak, his breath misting in the cold. "You're brooding again," he said lightly. "It's becoming a habit." Albus smiled faintly. "You should be used to that by now." Scorpius joined him at the railing. "You know, my mother used to say that every bit of magic has a shadow. The trick isn't to banish it, it's to make sure the shadow serves the light." Albus looked out across the snow-covered grounds. "You think that's possible? After everything?" Scorpius shrugged. "You sealed a cursed cauldron, born from one of the most ambitious wizards in history. I'd say that's a good start." For the first time in a long while, Albus laughed, a quiet, honest sound. The stars seemed to burn brighter for it. Far below, unseen in the dungeons, the faint golden rune pulsed once and faded. The cauldron's echo sank back into the bones of the castle, resting, waiting. And though peace returned to Hogwarts, it was not the peace of forgetfulness, but of vigilance, the kind that holds its breath between one age of magic and the next. For even in slumber, the cauldron of wishes listened still, dreaming of the day when another heart, full of longing and courage, would call its name once more. The Yule break descended upon Hogwarts Castle with a hush of snow and candlelight. The corridors glowed with garlands of evergreen and mistletoe, and the great hall shimmered with enchantments that made frost sparkle along the ceiling like a winter sky. Most students left for home, their laughter echoing briefly through the entrance hall before the carriages carried them away. But Albus Potter, Rose Granger Weasley, they told their families it was to study, though none of them said aloud what they truly feared, that leaving the castle unguarded might give the cauldron a chance to stir again. The days passed quietly at first. Snow piled high upon the battlements, and the frozen lake gleamed like a mirror of glass. The three friends spent their mornings near the fire in the library, the scent of old parchment mingling with pine smoke. Rose buried herself in ancient tomes, searching for any mention of Slytherin's later enchantments. Scorpius read aloud from dubious sources, occasionally breaking the silence with a dry comment that drew a reluctant smile from Albus. Yet even amid such calm, a restlessness grew within Albus. Each night he woke before dawn, heart racing, the echo of a whisper lingering in his mind. He would rise, draw his cloak about him, and stand by the window, staring at the lake where faint ripples disturbed the ice, though no wind stirred it. On the fifth night, the whisper became words. The wish sleeps beneath the snow. He turned sharply, wand drawn, but there was no one in the dormitory. The fire in the grate had burned low, casting long shadows. The whisper came again, from nowhere and everywhere. Beneath the snow, the truth remembers its shape. He knew then that the cauldron's echo had not faded at all. It was calling again, softly, carefully, as if testing whether he would listen. The next morning he told Rose and Scorpius what he had heard. Rose's eyes darkened. It's awakening through you again. Whatever balance you created, it's shifting. Maybe the cold has weakened the seals. Scorpius frowned. So what? Are we supposed to dig through the snow until we find another cursed artifact? Because I vote no. But Rose ignored him. The castle itself is alive to the cauldron's presence. If it says the truth lies beneath the snow, it might mean the foundation stones, something buried near the lake. Then we have to find it before it finds us. That afternoon, under a pale gray sky, they crossed the frozen lawns toward the lake. The air was sharp and still, and their breath hung in white plumes. The lake stretched before them, vast and silent, its surface sealed with ice. At its far edge, the forbidden forest loomed, black and dense against the snow. They followed the shoreline, wands out, muttering detection charms. After nearly an hour, Rose stopped abruptly. Her wand tip glowed a faint gold. Here, she whispered, there's something beneath. They knelt beside the ice, brushing away snow until faint carvings appeared. Runes, almost identical to those that had marked the floor of the dungeon. Scorpius muttered, "Please tell me we're not about to summon another talking relic." But before Rose could answer, the ice beneath their hands pulsed faintly. A shimmer rippled outward, cracking the frozen surface in a perfect circle. The water beneath glowed gold, and the whisper returned, louder now, resonant. The wish endures. The air remains. A shape rose through the water, not the cauldron itself, but a small, round medallion etched with the serpent and cauldron sigil. It hovered for a moment before drifting into Albus's outstretched hand. The metal was warm, thrumming softly. He could feel it, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Rose's voice trembled. "It's a fragment, part of the cauldron's essence. That's why the castle hasn't settled. It left something behind." Before they could react, the medallion flared brightly. Golden light shot skyward, illuminating the forest. When the glow faded, the medallion was gone. In its place stood a figure. It was Cassian Vale. His eyes were hollow, his face pale as frost, but his voice when he spoke was steady. "You sealed the cauldron, Albus Potter, and in doing so, you sealed me." Albus stepped back, disbelief churning in his chest. "Cassian, you were sent home. I was taken. Cassian, my truth was pride, remember? And pride does not die easily. The cauldron keeps me bound to it, half here, half beyond." Scorpius whispered, "He's a ghost." Cassian turned his gaze on him. Not yet, but close. He looked back at Albus. The cauldron is stirring because its heart was never destroyed. You carry part of it in your blood now, and so long as it beats within you, it will never sleep. Rose's breath caught. Then there must be a way to remove it. Cassian shook his head. No spell can sever it. The only way to silence it forever is to unmake the wish that bound it, and that wish is yours. Albus felt the words strike like cold iron. You mean, I have to undo what I did? Yes, you wished for it to sleep. Now you must wish for it to die. Scorpius stepped forward sharply. No, the last time someone tried to destroy it, the entire castle nearly collapsed. If he tries that again... But Cassian's image was already fading, dissolving into the mist. Be warned, his voice echoed faintly. To end a wish, one must first remember why it was made. The snow fell silently once more, covering the cracked ice. They returned to the castle in silence, their footprints vanishing behind them. That night, Albus sat awake in the common room, the fire low, the window glass rimed with frost. He tried to remember his wish, his fear, his truth, but all he could feel was the emptiness it had left. Rose joined him after midnight, her robe wrapped tightly around her. "You're thinking about what Cassian said," she murmured. He nodded. "How do you unmake a wish when you can't remember what drove it?" She sat beside him. "Maybe you don't. Maybe you find a new truth to replace it." He looked at her, at the steady determination in her eyes, and for a moment the weight in his chest eased. Outside, the wind sighed through the castle's towers, yet far below, in the depths of the frozen lake, the faintest pulse of golden light stirred. One heartbeat, slow and patient. The cauldron was not dead. It was listening. And in the quiet hours before dawn, as snow drifted against the windows, Albus Potter knew that before the year's end it would call to him again. The new term arrived beneath skies the color of iron. Winter's heart had settled deep over Hogwarts castle, and even the owls flew more slowly, wings heavy with frost. Students returned from the holidays bright with stories and laughter, unaware that beneath the calm surface of their world, old magic was once again stirring. Albus Potter felt it first, not as a sound or a whisper this time, but as a pull, low and insistent, like a thread tugging behind his ribs. It came when he was least prepared, during lessons, in the common room, even when he slept. He would wake with his wand in his hand and no memory of drawing it. His dreams were filled with gold and shadow, and in every dream the cauldron waited at the center, silent, patient, alive. Rose Granger Weasley noticed before he said anything. "You're slipping again," she said one morning as they left the great hall, snowflakes catching in her curls. "The cauldron's reaching for you." "I know," Albus admitted quietly. "But I can't fight something I can't see." Scorpius Malfoy fell into step beside them, his usual humor subdued. "Maybe you shouldn't fight it," he said. "Maybe you should finish what it started. You're bound to it. Maybe that's how we end it for good." Rose gave him a look. "End it by giving it exactly what it wants?" Scorpius shrugged, but his eyes were serious. "If it's feeding off him, then it's already winning. Unless we change the rules." Albus stopped walking. "What if he's right?" "Don't you dare," Rose said sharply. "You've already given enough." But Albus's thoughts had turned inward. Cassian's warning haunted him. To end a wish, one must... What had he wished for truly? Not for power, not for glory. He had wanted peace, peace for Hogwarts, peace for himself. Yet what if peace itself had been the trap? What if the Cauldron's sleep had merely been another dream, waiting to awaken stronger? That night he found himself drawn once more to the dungeons. The air there was colder than the rest of the castle, as though the stones had never warmed since the Founder's time. His footsteps echoed softly. When he reached the abandoned storeroom, he hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The runes had returned. They glowed faintly beneath the dust, winding in serpent-like patterns across the floor, and in their center something shimmered, a small golden pool, liquid light swirling within a perfect circle. He knelt beside it, heart pounding. "You never left," he whispered. The surface of the pool rippled. "Nor did you." The voice filled the room, deep and smooth like the murmur of a river. "The wish lives as long as the wisher breathes. You bound me, Albus Potter, but you cannot bind what was born from longing." He clenched his fists. "I didn't mean to create you. I only wanted to protect the castle, and so you did. But every act of protection is also an act of possession. You claimed the Cauldron's power as your own, even in wishing to end it." The light brightened, spilling golden reflections across the walls. "Your truth was fear. When you cast it away, you became my vessel. I am what you left behind." Albus's breath caught. "Then what are you now?" The voice softened, almost tender. "I am what you could become." For a moment the light gathered into a shape, a reflection of himself, taller, older, eyes like molten gold. It smiled faintly. "Let me finish what you began. Together we can make this world pure of fear, pure of weakness." "That's not who I am." "It is who you will be if you keep denying me." The light flared, and for an instant he saw the faces of others: Cassian, Ackerley, countless unnamed figures, all those who had touched the cauldron and been consumed by it. Their eyes burned with the same golden light. The reflection stepped closer. "End the division between wish and truth. Accept what you are." Albus raised his wand. "Finite!" The spell burst forth, but the light swallowed it whole. He felt a searing heat spread through his chest, the mark of the cauldron burning beneath his skin. Then a voice shouted from behind him, "Stupefy!" A red beam struck the reflection, shattering it into shards of light. Rose stood in the doorway, her wand raised, Scorpius close behind her. "Are you mad?" she cried. "You came here alone?" Albus staggered, panting. "It called me. I didn't mean to." "You never mean to," Scorpius muttered, gripping his shoulder. "Come on, before it pulls another trick." They half-dragged him back to the corridor. As they passed through the doorway, the runes dimmed, fading once more into the stone. Back in the common room, Rose forced him to sit while she muttered diagnostic charms. "It's worse than before," she said. "The connection's deeper. Whatever power you expelled that night when you sealed it, it didn't vanish. It rooted itself in you." Albus rubbed his temples. "Then how do I unroot it?" Rose hesitated. "The echo of the Founder told us, only by unmaking the wish." "And Cassian said the same," Scorpius added. "So what's the wish made of? Fear, truth, memory?" "Maybe all three," Rose said softly. "Maybe it's you." Her words hung in the air. That night, Albus dreamt again. But this time the cauldron did not appear. Instead, he found himself standing in the great hall. The enchanted ceiling was dark, the tables gone, the banners torn. Shadows coiled where students once sat. At the far end of the hall stood his "You fear what you might become," it said. But becoming is inevitable. Albus drew his wand. If I destroy you, will the cauldron die? The reflection smiled. Destroy me, and you destroy yourself. Light burst from the walls, swallowing everything in a storm of gold. He woke gasping, drenched in cold sweat. The fire in the dormitory had burned out, but in the ashes glowed faint traces of a symbol, a cauldron rimmed with serpents. When dawn came, he told Rose and Scorpius what he had seen. Rose's face was pale, but her voice was steady. Then that's what it wants, to make you its vessel completely. Scorpius frowned. So we stop it before it finishes the job. But Albus's gaze drifted toward the window where snowflakes glimmered against the gray morning. Or I finish it before it consumes anything else? Rose reached for his hand, but he pulled away gently. I made this wish, he said. It's mine to end. And in his voice there was no hesitation, no fear, only quiet resolve and something older stirring beneath it. The castle shivered, as though it too had heard. Somewhere deep within its bones, the cauldron's echo stirred once more, faint and rhythmic. The end of one wish, it seemed, was merely the beginning of another. The weeks that followed passed like a page half-turned. Days blurred into nights, and time seemed to bend within the enchanted corridors of Hogwarts Castle. Outside, the winter snows began to melt, but within the castle the air grew colder still. Albus Potter felt it always now. The slow, rhythmic pulse beneath his ribs, the whisper of the cauldron threading through his dreams and waking thoughts alike. It was no longer a voice, it was a presence. When he walked through the great hall, candles dimmed. When he crossed the courtyard, frost bloomed across the stones in his footsteps. Students gave him a wide berth, uneasy, without knowing why. Only Rose and Scorpius stayed close, watching the subtle change in him. You're fading, Rose said one morning as they studied in the library's shadowed alcove. You sleep less, eat less, and you're magic. Albus, it feels different, heavier. He didn't argue. She was right. His spells hummed with strange resonance, lingering in the air longer than they should. Even the professors had noticed, though none dared speak of it openly. Scorpius leaned forward across the table, his pale eyes sharp. We can't wait for it to consume you. There's got to be a way to tear it out. Some ritual, some counter-charm. Rose shook her head. You can't separate a soul from a wish. That's what the cauldron is. It binds essence to intent. To destroy it, he'd have to destroy the part of himself that made the wish. So he dies, Scorpius said flatly. No, Albus interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. Not death. Transformation. They both looked at him. The faint golden light beneath his skin had deepened since the night in the dungeons. It flickered now at his throat and temples, a strange inner fire that no potion could quell. The cauldron feeds on contradiction, he said slowly. Every wish it grants is born from conflict, fear against hope, truth against lie. I wished for peace, but I was afraid to face what peace required. That's what gave it life. If I face that fear willingly, maybe I can end it. Rose's eyes widened. Albus, that sounds like exactly the kind of logic every cursed object in history uses to devour its owner. He smiled faintly. Then I'll have to prove them wrong. That night, under a moon swollen and white, he went alone. The castle slept uneasily, the torches dim, the staircases whispering as if they, too, feared where he was going. He descended past the dungeons, deeper than before, through forgotten tunnels lined with slime-slick stones. At the end lay the chamber he had dreamed of so many times, the heart of Hogwarts. The air shimmered with faint light, and in the center, suspended above the stone floor, hung the great vessel itself. It was neither gold nor shadow now, but something between, pure shimmering silver, as though made from moonlight and smoke. The runes along its rim glowed with living light. Albus stepped forward. "I know you can hear me." The cauldron stirred and its surface rippled. A voice echoed not from the air but from within his mind. "You return to what you cannot escape." "I didn't come to escape," he said. "I came to end this." Endings are illusions. Wishes do not die. They transform. You would unmake me, and in doing so, unmake yourself. Then so be it. The cauldron brightened, filling the chamber with a light that seemed to pierce the very stone. "Show me your truth." He hesitated. Memories swirled, his father's tired eyes, the weight of his family's name, the long shadow of the boy who had lived. He had spent so many years trying to prove himself worthy of that legacy, afraid of failing to be what others expected. That was his truth, the quiet terror of being ordinary in a world built on legends. "I wished for peace," he whispered, "but what I truly wanted was to stop being afraid, of being less than him, less than what I'm supposed to be." The cauldron's surface trembled, reflecting his face. The golden light spread across his skin, wrapping him in warmth and pain all at once. "Then face it." Images crashed over him, memories not his own. Slytherin crafting the cauldron in secrecy, pouring his ambition into molten metal, Ackerley kneeling before it in the dark, Cassian reaching for power and losing everything. He saw them all, and beneath them himself, standing before the same choice. A shadow took shape beside him, his reflection again, the version of himself made from light and fear. It smiled, its eyes burning gold. "We could be perfect," it whispered. "No doubt. No failure. Only power enough to protect everyone you love. Perfection isn't peace." The reflection raised a hand and the cauldron flared. Magic crackled through the air, shaking the walls. From the doorway a voice cried, "Albus!" Rose and Scorpius burst into the chamber, their faces pale with horror. Rose raised her wand. "You can't fight it alone." "I'm not fighting," he said, his voice echoing strangely. "I'm choosing." He turned back to the cauldron, his reflection towering above him now. The two of them mirrored each movement perfectly. "You can't destroy what you are," the reflection said softly. "No," Albus answered, "but I can forgive it." And he stepped forward, merging with the light. A sound like wind and thunder filled the chamber. The cauldron's glow burst outward, flooding every passage, every wall of the castle. For an instant, the entire world was gold. Then the light receded, leaving silence. The cauldron was gone. The runes had turned to ash. Rose and Scorpius ran to where Albus had stood. For a terrible moment, there was nothing, only the faint hum of fading magic. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was Albus. But his eyes were no longer gold. They were clear, bright green, the same shade as his father's. The glow beneath his skin had vanished. Rose choked on a sob of relief. "You did it." He nodded slowly, looking around the chamber. "It's over. The cauldron's gone." Scorpius gave a shaky laugh. "Please tell me this time you're sure." "I'm sure," Albus said quietly. "I don't feel it anymore." They left the chamber together, their footsteps echoing softly through the tunnels. The castle seemed lighter, the air clearer, as if some great weight had finally lifted. When they reached the open courtyard, dawn was breaking. Snow glittered on the towers, and the first light of morning washed the sky in gold and rose. Albus paused, looking up at the horizon. The cauldron's whisper was gone, replaced by the soft murmur of life. Wind in the trees, water beneath the ice, the pulse of the living world. Rose touched his arm. "You faced your fear, Albus. That was always the answer." He smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe that was just the first lesson. Scorpius yawned, his usual humor returning at last. "Next time we stumble across an ancient artifact that promises to grant wishes, we're throwing it straight into the lake." Albus laughed, and the sound carried through the morning air. The castle echoed it, warm and alive, once more. Yet somewhere deep below, in the place where the cauldron had once stood, a single spark of light remained, faint, fragile, and waiting, because wishes, like truths, are never truly destroyed. They only sleep until the next dreamer dares to speak them aloud. Spring crept into Hogwarts Castle slowly that year, as though the land itself were cautious of awakening too soon. The snow melted from the turrets and courtyards, and the lake thawed into rippling silver once more. Crocuses and snowdrops burst through the cold soil, dotting the grounds with pale color. Yet even as warmth returned to the world, the castle carried a hush that had not been there before, a silence that felt like reverence, or perhaps remembrance. Albus Potter had changed. He still smiled, still attended lessons, still walked the corridors with Rose and Scorpius. But there was something different about him, a stillness behind his eyes that made others glance twice. The golden glow that had haunted his veins was gone, yet sometimes, when the light caught his face just so, it seemed as if he carried a reflection of that vanished radiance deep within. It was a quiet afternoon in late March when he and his friends climbed the green slope above the lake. The air smelled of thawing earth and cold water. Rose carried her notes as always. Scorpius walked with his hands in his pockets, kicking at stones. "It feels strange," Rose said at last, "to know it's truly over. No more whispers, no more dreams." Scorpius smirked faintly. "You say that like you miss it." "I don't," she said quickly, but her gaze lingered on the lake, where the surface shimmered under the sun. "It's just, everything feels too calm. Hogwarts always has something stirring. When it goes quiet, it almost feels like it's holding its breath." Albus looked out across the water, where the reflection of the castle wavered like a memory. "Maybe it's just resting. We've all earned that much." Yet even as he said it, a shiver passed through him. It wasn't fear. He no longer feared the cauldron, but awareness. The magic that bound Hogwarts together had always been ancient, vast, and unpredictable. He could feel its heartbeat still, deep beneath the earth, vast and patient. Later that evening, as the sunset cast long shadows across the great hall, Professor Minerva McGonagall stood at the teacher's table and cleared her throat. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice carrying easily over the clatter of dishes and murmur of students. "This term marks the beginning of Hogwarts' 1000th year. The Founders' Day celebrations will be held at the end of May. I expect every house to take part." A ripple of excitement passed through the hall. Students leaned toward one another, whispering plans and ideas. Albus felt Rose nudge him. 1,000 years, she said softly. "Imagine what the castle remembers." Scorpius grinned. "Hopefully not everything we've done." But Albus's gaze drifted toward the enchanted ceiling, where twilight clouds were turning violet and gold. 1,000 years, the lifetime of legends, and among them the Cauldron's tale would rest, half forgotten, folded into the many mysteries of Hogwarts' long history. That night, as he sat by the window in the common room, Albus heard the faintest, not the Cauldron's, never that, but something gentler, older, like the castle itself, murmuring in its sleep. Every wish leaves a mark, child of the line of light. What you gave up will guide those who come after. He closed his eyes and let the sound fade. In the weeks that followed, preparations for Founders' Day filled every corner of the school. The Great Hall transformed daily, banners unfurled, charms glittered like morning frost, and laughter echoed through the corridors once more. For the first time in many months, Hogwarts felt whole, but not all things were content to remain buried. One evening, as Albus and Rose left the library, they passed by the statue of Salazar Slytherin near the entrance to the dungeons. The stone eyes gleamed in the torchlight, and for a moment, Albus thought he saw something shift within them, a faint glimmer of gold. He froze. "Albus?" Rose asked, glancing back. He forced a smile. "Nothing. Just thought I saw a reflection." But as they walked on, he felt the faintest pulse beneath his feet, so subtle he might have imagined it. The days grew warmer, the air alive with the hum of spring. Founders' Day arrived beneath a sky so clear it seemed newly polished. The lawns were bright with banners, each house marked by its colors, and the students gathered in clusters beneath the towering spires. McGonagall stood at the dais, her robes of emerald and silver gleaming. "Today," she began, "we honor those who built this place, not just the founders, but every witch and wizard who has called it home. Their hopes, their fears, their wishes have shaped Hogwarts into what it is." The word wishes caught Albus's ear. He felt Rose glance at him, but kept his eyes fixed on the headmistress. When the feast began, candles floated higher than ever, the ceiling alive with stars. Music filled the hall, soft, ancient melodies that might have... And yet, beneath the laughter, Albus sensed something else. A pulse of energy, faint but familiar. It was in the flicker of the candles, in the gleam of the golden plates, in the low hum that threaded through the hall. He closed his eyes and listened. The cauldron's power had not died with its vessel. It had been absorbed by the castle itself, woven into its magic, its foundations, its very breath. Not a curse, no, not anymore, but a promise. The magic of wishes had become part of Hogwarts' heart. Later, when the celebrations faded and the students drifted off to their dormitories, Albus lingered in the great hall. The torches burned low, casting long shadows across the tables. He walked to the center of the room and whispered into the silence, "Are you still there?" For a moment, nothing answered. Then the faint shimmer of gold rippled across the air, soft like the afterglow of dawn. "Always," said a voice barely audible. Albus smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "Then keep them safe." The light dimmed, fading into the stone. He turned toward the door where Rose and Scorpius waited. Together they stepped out into the night. The air was cool and filled with the scent of spring, and the stars shone bright over the castle's towers. Hogwarts slept, but its heart was awake, and deep within its foundations, where light and darkness intertwined, the echo of the cauldron pulsed softly, no longer a thing of fear, but of memory, of longing, and of endless possibility. For in every era there would always be those who wished, and so long as they did, Hogwarts would listen. The final term of that fateful year came to Hogwarts like a sigh of summer. The air warmed, the lake shimmered blue once more, and the scent of wild thyme and clover drifted through open windows. The castle seemed alive with quiet joy, its walls humming with the soft magic of renewal. Yet beneath the calm, Albus Potter knew that something vast still lingered, an unseen heartbeat. Since Founder's Day, he had felt it more often, a subtle stirring in the stones, a warmth in the air when he walked the corridors at dusk. It was not a threat, no longer a voice that whispered in hunger, but a companion, silent and watchful. The cauldron's echo had become part of the castle itself, bound into its ancient heart. Sometimes when he passed the great staircase, the torches flickered gold for a moment, and he thought he could almost hear it breathing. Rose and Scorpius noticed his faraway looks, but said nothing. The three of them had endured too much together to need explanations. They shared glances instead of words, laughter in place of grief, and in that unspoken bond lay the strength that had carried them through. Exams came and went, long parchments filled with ink and weary sighs. On the final evening before summer break, the trio wandered down to the edge of the lake. The sunset blazed crimson and gold across the water, and the reflections of the castle's towers trembled like fire in the ripples. Scorpius skipped a flat stone across the surface, watching it bounce 3 times before vanishing. You realize this is the first term in 2 years where nothing tried to kill us. Rose gave a half smile. Don't jinx it. Albus chuckled softly. I'll take jinxes over ancient magical relics any day. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the gentle lap of the waves. Somewhere out on the lake, the giant squid stirred lazily, one tentacle curling up through the fading light. You know, Rose said quietly, when I was a child, I used to think Hogwarts was alive. I'd talk to the walls when I couldn't sleep. Mom said I was imagining things. Maybe you weren't, Albus replied. Maybe it was listening. She turned to him, her eyes catching the last of the sun's glow. Do you think it remembers everything that's happened? All the centuries? Yes, he said after a moment. I think it remembers every student who's ever called it home. Every fear. Scorpius flopped back onto the grass, hands behind his head. That's a bit unsettling, isn't it? Imagine the castle judging our every mistake. Or keeping us safe from them, Rose murmured. The wind shifted then, cool and gentle, stirring the grass around them. The lake rippled, and for the briefest instant a glimmer of gold appeared just beneath the surface, like sunlight caught in deep water. Albus didn't move. He only watched, his heart steady. The light faded again. But the feeling that followed was unmistakable. Warmth, calm, the quiet promise of something eternal. That night, as the castle slept, Albus dreamed, not of danger or loss, but of the cauldron as it had been before all corruption touched it. He saw it in its first form, newly forged in Slytherin's hidden chamber, silver bright and full of clear, rippling water. The voice that rose from it was not dark, but serene. Every wish is a seed, it said. Some grow thorns, some flowers, but all belong to the same garden. He stood beside it in the dream, unafraid. Then what am I now, gardener or seed? Both, came the reply. For one cannot tend to the world without tending to oneself. You have given truth to the earth of magic. Let others plant their hopes in its soil. When he woke, the dawn light was spilling through his window, golden as the cauldron's glow had once been. He sat up slowly, his heart light. For the first time since the ordeal began, he felt whole. Later that morning, the carriages lined the gates to carry students to the station. The air was filled with farewells, laughter, shouts. The calls of owls wheeling overhead. Rose and Scorpius stood beside him as they watched the last trunks being loaded. Scorpius stretched with a grin. You know, we deserve a quiet summer. No curses, no secret chambers. Just books, ice cream, and pretending we're normal. Rose rolled her eyes. You? Normal? You wound me. Albus smiled at their banter, the sound of it brighter than any spell. Whatever comes next, he said, we face it together. Rose nodded, and Scorpius clapped him on the shoulder. Always. As the last carriage rolled away, Albus lingered a moment longer. He turned to look back at the castle, the high towers rising into the blue, the windows glinting like 1,000 watchful eyes. The wind carried faint music from the great hall, the last echoes of the term's end. For a heartbeat, he felt that presence again, the quiet awareness within the stones, vast and kind. He bowed his head slightly, as one might to an old friend. Thank you, he whispered. The walls seemed to sigh in reply, a low hum that faded into the breeze. Years would pass, and stories would grow from the tale of the Cauldron of Wishes. Some would call it legend, others superstition. Few would ever know the truth that the greatest wish of all had not been for power or immortality, but for peace, and that a boy named Albus Potter had granted it not with spells, but with understanding. Hogwarts would endure another 1,000 years, its heart beating with the dreams of those who walked its halls. And in the secret places where torchlight never reached, faint golden runes would shimmer upon the stones whenever a new student whispered a hope into the air. The cauldron's echo was no longer a curse. It was a promise, one carried in every spell, born of courage, every act born of love. As the sun rose high over the castle's towers, the lake caught the light and scattered it in ripples of gold. And if one looked closely deep within the reflection, they might glimpse for just a moment a great silver vessel resting in the depths, its surface calm, its fire sleeping, waiting as all ancient magic waits, not for those who... And thus the tale of the Cauldron of Wishes ended, not with darkness nor with triumph, but with quiet grace, and the promise that even the oldest magic, when touched by truth, could learn to